Welcome to another episode of Newy Tech People. Today we have Justin Stafford, CEO and co-founder of Blueshift. Welcome, Justin.
Thanks, I appreciate it.
Welcome to the podcast. And for those that don't know who you are, can you please give us a bit of an overview of your story to date?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, my name is Justin. I studied at university starting around 99, 2000, computer science, computer engineering, and always sort of wanted to head into a tech career with some of the major sort of Sydney firms, I would say. At the time, I was working part-time as a software engineer for Sanitarium health food company on the Central Coast. And as a result of that, one of the long-term team members there approached me and said, hey, do you want to do a startup in this space that we were working at Sanitarium? And my initial response was no. But later on, I thought about it and thought, well, it's actually a pretty good opportunity. If there's a stage in life to do it, it would be now when there's no serious financial commitments in my life. And so I did, and that led to me founding with my co-founder Blueshift. And we are where we are today about 15, 20 years later. So that's a bit of a history. I haven't had a lengthy career going around lots of companies. I sort of started in the early days and have been running Blueshift ever since.
Yeah, perfect. Mate, you mentioned a couple of points there, which are really pertinent to both Central Coast and Newcastle. A lot of software developers or tech people in general come out of university and think you have to go to Sydney, or previously you had to go to Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane.
Yeah, absolutely.
For opportunities. I think that's starting to change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your thoughts on that? You're obviously lucky enough to get an opportunity locally to start with.
Yeah, I guess it's a good point. I guess I at the time when I was young, I thought, well, the opportunities are in Sydney, and that was just the mental model that I had. Certainly these days, I mean, that was pre-iPhone, pre-social media days. And so there was a lot less networking going on. And so it was harder to sort of get a feel for the kind of scene, if you would. These days it is a lot easier. And certainly from what I've noticed, there's a very good tech scene in Newcastle. And maybe had I had my time again, it would have changed my view. But yeah, it's a good point that you raised. It's certainly something that we need to undo, this notion that there's an opportunities in tech space in Newcastle.
Yeah, and I think so. The other part during COVID at the moment with the rise in remote work, it might be another challenge and opportunity both for Central Coast and Newcastle from the perspective of bigger companies, maybe in the bigger cities, are now offering full-time remote work for people where you can stay living on the coast of Newcastle and be full-time remote. Yeah,
you're absolutely right. And for us, we see that as a double-edged sword. I mean, we have a fairly strong engineering team based on the Central Coast, and we have gone to a remote work situation. We had quite a large office, and that's effectively now closed, and we've gone to remote work. And we see it as a double-edged sword because we remain committed to recruiting, not just in Australia, but in the local area, even though we're going to remote first. And in fact, we've gone down the track of getting official Australian-made branding. And so we now wear that badge on our product and on our branding. And so we still have a commitment, not just to the local, not just to Australia, but to local recruitment, specifically Central Coast and Newcastle. And we've moved some of the offshoring we were doing in relation to outsourcing graphic design and legals even to the local area as well. But that is a double-edged sword because when you move to remote work, then it does open up the opportunities for your staff to go elsewhere as well. So it increases the competitive pool. So it is a double-edged sword, as you say.
I completely agree. So with your remote first work, is there any thoughts on ever going back to an office? Is that remote for as long as you can see at the moment? What's your longer term play?
Yeah, sure. So we've sort of gone from our journey as we had an open plan office, and as that started to grow and we put more people into the open plan office, we found that productivity did decline a little bit as a result of the noise because you do have both modes of work. Certainly you do have collaborative work that's good for, but you also have deep work, which suits sort of deep technical problem solving, which works well in a quiet space. So we actually expanded our office to be about 4 times that size with individual offices for the engineers, and found that worked quite well. And with COVID, that also helped us to realize that there wasn't that much of a difference between having an office where engineers had their own offices to working from home. And as a result, we've done that. Now, having said that, we do bring all the engineers together on a monthly basis to have meetings and have team activities because that face-to-face is still important. And so we plan to still maintain that and certainly bring the whole team together. So I mean, on the consulting side, we have consultants that are Auckland, Brisbane, Melbourne, Sydney, and we plan to bring them together once every 6 months, obviously COVID pending. So we do see value in both the remote work, deep work style, as well as bringing them together as well.
I think it's a really nice balance. Some of the companies I'm working with are doing similar things because there's definitely that human element that gets missed in this full-time remote. So when you're bringing people back for a collaborative work, is that going to be in your old offices or will that be an off-site type scenario?
Yeah, look, it's probably not going to mean our old office, and that's just purely a return on investment scenario. You can, I mean, for example, at one of the recent functions we had, we hired one of the exclusive beachside resorts, Kim's Retreat at Tawoon Bay, and that only cost us $300 for a whole day for the whole team. So it's significantly more economical and better for our staff to do that than to, I suppose, maintain a facility at a much higher cost.
Yeah, for sure. I think there are some companies I'm working with that are transitioning. I guess they're in longer term leases and they're transitioning their internal offices into that more collaborative work styles and those bigger meeting room type scenarios, and people can come in for the meetings and then they shoot back out for their remote work.
Yeah, and that's sort of along the lines of what we're moving to. Yeah,
it's a nice approach, and I think it definitely ticks that human element that people are looking for as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I went back to what you mentioned at the start, it seems like you did take a risk. There are people that are starting tech companies, there tends to be two ways. People are building something on the side while working in a full-time job. And then there's others that jump fresh into it. You obviously, you went whole hog and jumped into this as a 100% time and effort into that. Can you provide some insights into why you went fully in as opposed to maybe building on the side while working?
Yeah, sure. And I think that I'm going to say blessed to be in that position, because at the time it wasn't even on my radar to do it, as I mentioned, but at the suggestion of a co-worker to do it, I thought about it and thought, yes, actually, that's a good idea. And I was very, as I say, blessed, because at the time I was living at home, I was young, I didn't really have any costs. And I was also able to continue to work part-time 1 to 2 days a week at Sanitarium to earn a small amount of money and then devote the rest of the time to the startup. So it was a very opportunistic thing, but I do agree, like starting a startup when you have bills to pay is not the easiest thing to do, and it does involve a level of risk, and I appreciate that for sure.
Yeah, sounds like, hey, a little bit lucky from right place, right time. There's another element, you make your own luck. You're in that position to have the conversation with the right person.
That's right.
So you're working at Sanitarium, you went out, you've got this idea, you jumped into it. Can you explain the early days? What did that look like?
Yeah, sure. So maybe I just back a little bit and explain a little bit about Blueshift, because that'll give you a little bit of context. So in terms of what we do, we provide a software solution to companies that are suppliers to Woolies and Coles predominantly. So examples of that would be Sanitarium and Peter's Ice Cream and Bulla, Swiss Vitamins, Baby Love nappies, that kind of client. So we actually have a very small number of very large clients. So over the last, I suppose, 15 years, we've got a total of about 20 clients. And to bring on 2 to 3 new clients per year is a good year. But these are very, very big contracts. And what we do for them is when you go into a Woolies or a Coles and you see something on sale, it's the supplier that's actually funding the discount predominantly. It's not Woolworths or Coles doing you any favors. And with that, you see a massive increase in the sales. And with that comes manufacturing concerns you need to know to produce more in advance. And there's return on investment concerns and best bang for your buck. And then there's managing the transactional side. So there's a bunch of optimization and transactions that goes along with that. And these companies typically spend anywhere between 10 and 30% of their total revenue on this kind of discounting. And when you're managing that on spreadsheets, it gets a bit unwieldy, as you can imagine. And so that's where our solution comes in. And for a company to implement our solution, it relies on strong reference sites. And so to loop back to answer your question, our initial focus was on signing a deal about the IP and a reference site with Sanitarium, who we had a trust relationship with. And we were able to do that, and they acted as a reference for us, which then allowed us to go and sell into the market to these other bigger companies who could then visit Sanitarium and have that reference site for us.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
So there's a couple of points I want to pull apart there, but let's go back to the original question. So you jumped in, you've got this reference site. There's you and a co-founder.
Yep.
And you started building the software.
That's right. Yeah. So I spent most of the time with myself and my co-founder and a couple others building out the software and implementing it within Sanitarium and getting it working really well there. And that took a good few years, to be honest. And then once that was done, we then started to go, well, now let's roll it to the open market. So the initial days was mostly about building that proof of concept and that pilot site within Sanitarium.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it sounds like, once again, a great opportunity, because a lot of struggles for startups is finding that product market fit or building an MVP.
That's right.
And being able to have somebody to test it, where it sounds like you had that ready-made,
That's
client there that you're building it with, and potential first customer already on board.
Exactly. That's right.
That's fantastic. If we go to, you started there, how did the team grow from there to where you are now?
Yeah, I'd say it took probably our first biggest break. We had a few wins along the way where we were expanding our tech team, expanding in the sales area in terms of growth. And we kind of had our next, I would say, big win, which was securing Fonterra, which is a big dairy company, much bigger than Sanitarium even in 2009. And sort of after that, we really ramped up in terms of recruitment around, especially the tech side and engineering, to be able to implement and build out features faster and quicker. Because obviously when you start to grow your company base beyond a single customer, you start to get additional things that are required and so on. And so we've definitely had a culture of more so on the engineering side. And where we're at today, our engineering team is the bigger part of our team, and that's really where our DNA has come from.
Yeah, nice. So engineering first, and you're obviously a software company.
That's right.
To the bone.
That's right.
With both co-founders being technical.
That's right.
I talked a little bit pre-podcast about this. The rise through a tech career. You obviously started out extremely technical. Now, you're now the CEO of a growing company.
Yep.
How does your career transition through that period? Are you still hands-on technical? Are you writing code? Are you managing people? How's that journey been for you?
Yeah, look, it's actually really interesting, and that's one of the benefits of being a startup. It forces you to learn in a much broader spectrum. So for me, it's been amazing because I've had to learn not just the tech side, but how to manage people, how to do recruitment, how to manage finances, how to do sales, how to do a pitch, how to fundraise, all of those things. And so I'm sort of involved in all of those different areas these days. I do a little bit of coding, but mainly on the experimental side. The engineers do by far the lion's share of the coding these days. But I am still fairly heavily involved on the design side and the architectural oversight. But certainly it's more about managing people and those other aspects these days.
If you had to provide some advice to other people that are sort of starting to face that journey, they're in a smaller team at the moment, and they could be sitting within a bigger corporate, but managing a small team and starting to grow that, and having to look at other parts and how, their technology affects other parts of the business or the customers. Can you provide any of key learnings that you found along the way in making that growth? It's not even a transition, it's a growth, right?
So just to clarify the question, you mean in relation to someone who's in a tech role and looking to transition into more of a management role?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the question is, depends on the personal goals, if you will, because I know that there are a lot of tech people who like to sort of stay in the tech role and head more down an architectural route. And I know there are, so for example, we've got one of our team members who started in a tech role and he's moved to be a consultant because he loves working closely with the clients. So I think it helps to clarify exactly what the goal is and then be able to go in that direction with relevant research and talking to industry players and networking and so on like you'd ordinarily expect. But I think the first thing is to understand exactly where you want to go and then take the appropriate steps rather than sort of necessarily meandering.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I completely agree. I think some of the people that are most successful in their careers are doing things that they love, right? And
yeah, absolutely.
If some people are more technically inclined and want to stay purely technical, you can still be in a very senior role and paid well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being non-people management and just extremely technical and good at what you do. The people management side, for a lot of people in technology, going into that people management side is a challenge. Is there any key learnings you've found from people management? Is there any resources that you've tapped into, books you've read, or anything you, once again, could provide others for advice in people management in particular?
Yeah, look, it's a very good question. And my favorite book as far as that's concerned is actually a very old one. It's called How to Win Friends and Influence People. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that one, Dale Carnegie. And it's the interesting key points there that Dale raises there is that it's not just about being technically right. It's about, the ability to influence people and work with people is actually more important than being right or wrong at the end of the day. And that's been a key learning for me. And I think that if you can inspire people to work together and swim in the same direction, that's actually a greater skill when it comes to having a team than technical capability, for sure.
I completely agree. And I think that's a very real challenge, right? Especially, once again, if we tap back into that remote side as well, will be an ongoing challenge, and maybe even a bigger challenge for a lot of organizations is managing remotely and getting people on the same page that aren't in the office day in, day out, right?
Absolutely.
Mate, you just mentioned obviously the challenges of managing people as you grow a team. Getting people in the door, recruiting people from the start is obviously the business we operate in, and it's a challenging time, especially in technology. Can you provide a little bit of insights into your journey recruiting people in particular, and then growing them?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So as far as a business is concerned, we place a huge emphasis on our team. In fact, our sales pitch to new clients always begins with the statement that we believe our team is more valuable than our solution. So we place a very strong emphasis on the value of our team, and we have a lot of investment in them. In terms of recruitment, specifically in the technical space, we believe that an interview always fundamentally boils down to 3 key questions. Number 1, are you capable? Do you have the skills? Number 2, do you want to do the role? Do you have a passion for it? And number 3, effectively, can I tolerate working with you? Do you have a cultural fit? And pretty much any question comes down to one of those 3 things. And on the capability question, we have screening exams that we do, which are designed to tease out technical capability, and we always look at history around that as well. Number 2, do you want to do it? And I guess that comes out in the interview, but we also look for other signs like, do you have side projects? Do you have a passion for the technical space? What has your history revealed about whether your direction you want to go? Are you attending user groups? And what do you listen to? Do you listen to podcasts in the tech space? And this is a very good indication that you have a passion for the tech space and for learning. And can I tolerate working with you? Well, that's a cultural fit. Like, what's your experience in working with a team and the different team methodologies? From things like, are you working in Scrum and Kanban? How have you interacted with a team and worked together collaboratively on problem solving? What's your view on pair programming or not? These kind of things give an indication of, how you work together as a team. So that would be what I would say as far as the 3 things that we look for and as far as recruitment, and we've had a lot of success that way.
Yeah, perfect. I'll break that apart a tiny bit. The first part there, you mentioned the technical test. Do you actually put people through a technical test, or like an online technical test? Is it coding in front of you? What's that technical test look like for you?
Yeah, for us, it's an online technical test. When I say it's online, we just email a test and they do it in their own time, which involves some coding, and then they send it back. So it's time bound in the sense that we give them the test and then they have a certain time period to then respond. But they're free to use Google or anything they like. And then what we do is in the interview, we step through their answers and do a code review with them to see how they solve the problem.
Yeah, perfect. I love that from the element of you then get some feedback on that. You can come in and discuss the thought process behind it, because a lot of the times I think you can miss the right person potentially who got the wrong answer, but they thought about it the right way. They might have made a little mistake there, but if you got the right thought process there and you can tease that out in your face-to-face,
absolutely,
you can get the right person in. The second part you mentioned, the desire and the want to be there.
Yeah.
Personally, I think that's near enough the most important part for recruitment.
Absolutely.
Technical skills can be taught and can be learned. If we're talking software development, they might not have experience with a particular programming language at that point in time, but if they've shown a desire to be there and a desire to learn, they're going to have to pick it up a new language at some point, right? So I think that desire to be there, that want, is the biggest part for getting successful hires in that, in any space, but software development in particular.
And I think that's evidence of your business success is the fact that you're even running your own podcast and creating the content. So, it's a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah. The other part you mentioned, which seems extremely true to my heart, is that side projects. For us, we've placed a lot of graduates that have started on some very sizable wages salaries because they've come out with a uni degree, but they've built something on the side, and they come in on mid-level salaries nearly, and they're graduates fresh out, but they've been able to show their capability through a side project. Can you speak to any experiences or advice you could give to people with building something on the side or showing their desires? Tinkering, I think those are the sort of things that help people stand out personally, but it's great to hear it from being a technical founder yourself. from your side?
Yeah, look, I think the advantage you get in running a side project is that it forces you to demonstrate end-to-end understanding. So it is relatively easy to get into a role where you're handed a small technical problem and told to solve that especially if you're told how to solve it. That's one thing. But to take a side project where you need to understand the outcome and then map that back through requirements and understanding and even design and technical solution and architecture to produce some output demonstrates a much broader breadth of understanding and capability than pure technical. And I think that's one of the benefits that you get when you do a side project is you get that breadth of understanding end to end. And it also obviously demonstrates a desire to do that problem solving and so on. As far as selecting the side projects, I'm kind of a bit indifferent to that. Whatever you're passionate about, right? You find a problem that you're passionate about and solve it well,
Oh, I agree. Once again, passionate, it's easier to jump into something and see it through, right, if you're passionate about it, as opposed to build something in a category you have no understanding or desire to ever look for.
Yeah.
We've gone through that initial process in building, recruiting a team, then onboarding and building that culture. Can you speak to, once again, thoughts around building a culture where you've had some success from that perspective? Building a culture in a technical team is a challenge. We get all different types of people. So I'm really interested to sort of hear your thoughts on what you guys have focused on building a culture at Blueshift.
Yeah, look, it's a good question. And to be honest, I don't have a silver bullet for that other than to say we have an emphasis on continually communicating that we value our team and that we demonstrate that by a number of things. Like previous to COVID, we had a number of perks. So for example, we gave them 2 hours of exercise per week kind of a thing in time. Plus we provided lunches for them every day, the whole Google kind of scenario. In a post-COVID remote work world, we pay for, $750 for them to set up their home environment. We give them learning allowances, exercise allowances, and continually invest in that space. And not that perks are the be all and the end all. It's just a bit of a sign that we do appreciate. We do appreciate them. We also place an emphasis on, like you said, coming together as a team, not just for technical problem solving, but for, I suppose, team building. And not just from the perspective of general team building. We also come together to we have a strong emphasis on retrospectives where everyone has a voice and says, this is what's working well, this is what's not working well, and this is how we can improve, not just at a technical level, but at a process and a cultural level as well. So they all have a voice and understand where the business is going and how to contribute to that. So as I say, no silver bullet, but some of those are some small examples of how we help to do that.
That last part you mentioned, everyone having a voice. I think it's a challenge that some organizations face, very top-down approach.
Yeah.
How do you encourage people that come in, might be nervous or might be early in their career to have that voice or have the confidence to have that conversation internally?
Yeah, look, we do, like I say, have a structured process around retrospectives, and that is very structured where everyone participates. And I mean, if you're not familiar with retrospectives, it's where everyone places their ideas on the board. Everyone gets to vote for the ideas that they think are the most pertinent to talk about, and then they get talked about. So it is a structured way that is very clear that everyone gets to contribute and everyone gets to have that voice. So that is one way. And the other way is we do have all of the normal things like team one-on-ones and team group meetings that we're continually communicating over and over that voice is there for them to have.
Yeah, mate, I think that's some really tactical advice that people can actually take away. So appreciate that. Yeah,
and I'd certainly encourage listeners, if they haven't come across the retrospective process, for them to look into it because it's very, very valuable.
Yeah, nice. You mentioned again previously to this, you as an organisation, personally, you guys are looking into OKRs. Can you provide some advice or some insights into why you've decided to go down that route and what that is for people that don't understand?
Yeah, sure. So OKR stands for Objectives and Key Results, and it's a management framework that allows you to have a lot more focus and alignment in the business, and it gives better clarity for the whole team to understand how what they're working on right now contributes to the overall organizational goals. And again, have a voice in those organizational goals. There's some very good books out there you can read on OKRs. One of them is called Measure What Matters, and it's a story about how Google and Intel implemented these things to get their radical growth. And I'd suggest that one for those interested in it. And yeah, it's one of the benefits of OKRs is that yes, you have a company level objective, but then each team gets to decide how are they going to measure their goals, their performance up against the overall company objective, and they get to set their own bar and then work aspirationally towards that. So it's quite a good framework, and we're relatively early days into it, but so far it seems like it's going to work quite well.
Nice, very nice. It sounds like you've built a business over a long period of time that's having some real success now. What's next? What's on the horizon for Blueshift?
Yeah, look, good question. So we've, as we mentioned, and coming from my DNA, we've always been engineering focused. So we've been product focused. And one of my learnings over the last 12 months or longer is that we need to transition to be more customer focused. Not that we haven't been focused on the customer, we just need to be more focused on that side than on the product. And over the next sort of 2 to 3 years, we're going to transition to being, instead of a product-focused company, to be more a customer-focused company in terms of client acquisitions and investing more on that side. And that's really where the focus is going to be. And that's really what OKRs is going to align the business around as well.
Nice. It sounds like there's some alignment there, and you're not just hoping to jump from a product-focused to a customer.
That's right.
You're putting the right steps in place. So really like that. How big is the organisation now? How many employees we like?
Yeah, so there's 25 staff all up, and that consists of engineers, data engineers, ops, consultants, back of office sales.
Yeah, and so you're CEO of a 25-person organisation. You mentioned you're a little bit technical. You dabble in the technical side of it, but you also have breadth, like an exposure across the organisation.
Yep.
How do you manage your day, your week?
Yeah, look, I'm a huge proponent of time management strategies. Like I'm a big fan of the GTD methodology, if you're familiar with that, and also time blocking and using a whole bunch of tooling around that. So I manage my time fairly religiously, as most CEOs no doubt would, and that helps me to cover off the most important things in each of those areas.
You mentioned some tools there. Are we talking time blocking as basic as, blocking out chunks in your calendar? Is there anything more technical than that?
Probably a couple of the key tools I use in work life. Asana would be the number one tool that I use, and not just myself, it's across the whole organization. And that's very, very good to keep everyone on track and manage the workload at a high level and at a detail level. And in personal world, I use Todoist, which is the same sort of thing, but in the personal realm to do it. And then time blocking is normally just calendaring. Yeah.
So that'd be productivity tools that you would, your toolkit that you would recommend to others.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think the other part is that with a lot of those, the tools, the capability within the tools is never the issue. It's the actual usability of the people actually using them, sticking to them, right?
Ideas are cheap. Execution is everything.
Yeah. Is there anything in particular that allowed you to have success in getting to-do lists and up and running and sticking to that? Is it just you were forced to do it because you're so busy, or is it something you did to stay on top of that?
I probably took a big step forward in time management productivity, not really as a result of the business, to be honest, but when I had kids. Because when you have kids, you really have to manage your time well, and that sort of forced me to look into the different methods and drill down on that, because every hour of the day is important. So that's really what prompted me to do it. And in terms of the method, GTD would be the number one thing I'd suggest as the thing that's benefited me.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, as Gavin we mentioned, you've had to take a lot of learning into and the breadth of your role. You mentioned you went to university to start with. What was your experience at university like?
Yeah, not too bad. And I would definitely suggest university as a good track. I guess in the tech space, it's a little bit unique. If you want to be like a teacher or a nurse, you have to go to university. You have to get a piece of paper before you can really work in that space. Tech is a little bit different in that you can sort of start at uni and you don't need a ticket in order to develop software.
Yeah.
And I would suggest to the listeners that certainly going to university is a good thing, but also getting work in the industry whilst there is actually beneficial to your learning experience as well.
I love that advice. Post-university, is there external resources? Is there books? Is there podcasts? What are the tools that you've used or the avenues you've used to continue your learnings?
Oh, look, there's so many, but yeah, you are right. Podcasts are a big one. Software Engineering Daily is a really good one. And there are a number of others that are technical and non-technical that you can continue to learn. And it depends on the individual. And as we were discussing previously, like the whole post-COVID thing, work from home meant that there's now potentially less commuting, and so there's less time in podcasts, but there's other online resources, and there's all sorts of online courses, from something as simple as YouTube to more paid options. There's so much out there now that's available.
Anything that you'd recommend to people?
I think that for me, I learn best by actually doing. So, I mean, recently I've been doing some side projects in a new language, and I've just got in there and done it and defined the outcome. It's like the side project method. So, personally for me, I don't do too many online courses. I just define the problem and get in and learn it and do it and experiment. And that's the way that I learn best.
Yeah. I love the fact that a guy that's still at the CEO level is still taking on that own advice that you provide for, the juniors that you recruit is, get out there, build, get your hands dirty.
That's
trial
right.
and test. So,
that's how I learn. Yeah, absolutely.
You've obviously mentioned you've also gone down the coaching route with the OKRs. So you've found that beneficial. So coaching, we're looking at books, podcasts, YouTube, just say pick something that, that sings to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you kind of need to do all of that. To me, I use books and podcasts as the inspiration and also to keep up to date as to what's out there. And then when it comes time to actually doing it, that's when you get into, okay, now that I'm up to date, now that I've seen my interest has been perked in an area, then actually doing it is how I then take that to concretely learn. And as you pointed out, when it's something serious like OKRs, which is a big organizational change, we will involve external consultants, and we've done that across a number of initiatives in the organization. But that can get expensive.
I agree. And as you mentioned before, it doesn't have to get expensive to start with, right? There's a lot of free resources until you get to that stage. So yeah, I love that advice as well. There's so many. There's limitations that you can move to the side, right? There's so many free access to free resources out there for people these days.
Yeah, it's much easier to learn something really fast these days than back in the early 2000s. That's for sure.
Yeah, and there's access to the best and brightest in the world, right? So on that note, is there any people that you follow in particular that are your favorite authors or favorite coaches or?
Not really, I would say to that, but certainly I do get a lot of value as far as that's concerned from like attending conferences. Like I'm a big fan of conferences like NDC, for example, where you get a lot of really talented people at demonstrating how they do things, and that to me is very valuable as well.
Conferences, I think, it can be, once again, a double-edged sword. It can be something that's extremely valuable to people or not, depending on how you go. And,
yeah, absolutely.
Your thoughts on conferences is that you mentioned it's something you'd encourage people to go to. If you had somebody's going to their first conference, what advice would you give them? Is it go there networking? Is it, just take as many notes as you can? Thoughts?
Yeah, look, good question. So for me, it's kind of in the same sort of category to the book and the podcast. It's more of inspiration and seeing what's out there. Like I wouldn't have the expectation that you'll come away and you'll know a new language or a new technique, but you'll certainly be aware of it and be like, oh, wait a minute, that could help solve this problem I've got over here. And then you can take that and then do some more deeper research. So to me, it's more about getting inspiration and, to your point, networking with people who've got real experience than it is about coming away Matrix style, having learnt it. So
I love that. I love the couple points you've just mentioned there. It's just using books, podcasts, conferences as inspiration, and then deep diving into those topics that you really want to learn and take to the next level. If you had to provide some advice to a younger version of yourself, you've gone through obviously some pretty significant growth within your role in the company. Any advice that you would wheel back that you could provide to a young version of yourself or somebody else that might be in a similar-ish position?
Yeah, look, I would say two things to that. Number one, I would say, especially in terms of a startup, get a lot closer to the customer and have that customer focus. And number two, working with people and understanding and interacting with people is more important than the technical side. That would be what I would tell my former self.
Yeah, nice. I like that. I like that a lot because I think technology, you can get deep in the actual tech itself. Whereas, there's plenty of extremely well-built apps sitting in the App Store that were built for people that don't actually want set apps.
Exactly.
Anything else you'd like to share with our listeners before we wrap up today?
No, I've appreciated working with Linda, and who's no doubt on your team. And, I just wanted to say thanks for the great work you guys do in Newcastle.
Awesome, mate. Thank you. Appreciate it. It's great to see, once again, some local success stories, especially in the tech space. We love seeing it and love seeing, companies that are born and bred locally grow. So cheers to future success for Blueshift.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks, mate.
Cheers.